She was 7 years old. She loved butterflies. He took
She was a
everything
child.
from us.
Wrong place, wrong time. Get over it.
Order! Show respect or you will be held in contempt.
Vincent Carr thought the trial was already over. He had been convicted of first-degree murder in the death of 7-year-old Emma Patterson, a crime so brutal that even seasoned prosecutors struggled to describe it in court. The evidence was overwhelming. His DNA was at the scene. Security footage placed him in the area. His own confession, given with disturbing casualness, detailed exactly what he had done. But Carr didn't care. He had spent the entire 6-week trial smirking, whispering to his attorney, and showing zero remorse. And when Emma's parents stood to deliver their victim impact statements on that warm Thursday afternoon in June, Carr decided to show exactly what kind of monster he really was. That decision, made in a packed courtroom with the world watching, would seal a fate that even his defense attorneys couldn't have predicted. Before we continue, where are you watching from? If this is your first time here, please hit that subscribe button. Stories like these need to be shared, and your support helps us bring more truth to light. Vincent Carr, 34, had a history that read like a catalog of escalating violence. Juvenile arrests for assault, adult convictions for aggravated battery, restraining orders from 3 different women, animal cruelty charges that had been pleaded down, psychiatric evaluations that described him as having complete lack of empathy, narcissistic personality disorder, and antisocial tendencies. He had spent time in and out of prison, each release followed by more violence, each arrest building toward something inevitable. Prison counselors had warned that Carr showed textbook signs of a predatory offender who would escalate to murder. Their warnings had been noted in reports that were filed away and ignored. And on March 14th, those warnings became horrifying reality. Emma Patterson had been walking home from school that afternoon. It was a beautiful spring day, the sun bright overhead, the kind of weather that made the short walk feel like an adventure. Her elementary school was only 4 blocks from her house, a route she had walked dozens of times, always staying on the main streets where neighbors could see her. Her parents, David and Rebecca Patterson, had taught her about stranger danger, had made her promise to never go anywhere with someone she didn't know. Emma had followed every rule, but Carr, who had been released from prison just 3 months earlier, had been watching the neighborhood, learning patterns, identifying vulnerabilities. And when he saw Emma walking alone that afternoon, he made his move. The details of what happened next were so disturbing that the judge had cleared the courtroom of anyone under 18 during the prosecution's presentation. Carr had approached Emma, told her that her mother had sent him to pick her up, that there had been an emergency. Emma, trusting and kind, had believed him. He had led her to his van parked 2 blocks away. And what he did to that little girl over the next 4 hours, before leaving her body in a drainage ditch 15 miles outside of town, was the kind of evil that shakes communities to their core and makes people question how such monsters can exist. Emma's body was found the next morning by a jogger. The autopsy revealed she had been strangled after enduring unimaginable suffering. The forensic evidence was overwhelming. Carr's DNA was found on Emma's clothing. Fibers from his van matched those found on her body. And security footage from a gas station showed his van in the area at the exact time Emma disappeared, with what appeared to be a small figure in the passenger seat. Carr was arrested 48 hours later. During interrogation, he confessed with chilling detachment, describing what he had done with the same tone someone might use to discuss their grocery list. He showed no emotion, no regret, no recognition that he had destroyed a family and taken an innocent life. The detectives who interviewed him later said they had never encountered someone so completely devoid of humanity. The trial had been agonizing for the Pattersons. They sat in the front row every single day, holding hands, listening to evidence that no parent should ever have to hear. They watched Carr sit at the defense table, unmoved, sometimes doodling on a notepad, occasionally whispering jokes to his attorney that made him smile. They watched him show more interest in the courtroom sketch artist than in the testimony about what he had done to their daughter. And they watched the jury, 12 strangers, look at Carr with barely concealed disgust as they heard the evidence and delivered their verdict. Guilty on all counts. Now, 2 weeks after the conviction, it was time for sentencing. The courtroom was packed. Media filled the back rows. Victim advocates sat with the Patterson family. And Emma's school had sent a delegation, her teacher and principal there to bear witness. Judge Patricia Morrison, a 30-year veteran of the bench who had presided over hundreds of murder cases, sat stone-faced as she prepared to hear victim impact statements before delivering her sentence. David Patterson spoke first. His voice cracked as he described Emma's laugh, her dreams of becoming a veterinarian, the way she had decorated her room with butterfly stickers. He talked about the moment police knocked on their door, the hours of agony before Emma's body was found, the nightmares that woke him every night. And he looked directly at Carr, who sat slouched in his chair, examining his fingernails. "You took my daughter," David said, his voice shaking with grief and rage. "You took her future, her dreams, everything she could have become. I hope you rot in hell for what you've done." Carr yawned, visibly, dramatically, as if he was bored. Rebecca Patterson stood next, clutching a photo of Emma from her 7th birthday, the last one she had celebrated. Her hands trembled as she began to speak, her voice barely above a whisper. "Your Honor, may I address the defendant before you pass sentence?" Judge Morrison nodded. "You may, Mrs. Patterson." Rebecca turned to face Carr, tears streaming down her face. "My daughter Emma was 7 years old. She loved butterflies, drawing, and making people smile. She was kind to everyone. She rescued injured animals. She wanted to make the world better." Her voice broke. "You took her from us. You took everything. How could you do this to a child? How could you?" Carr laughed. Not a chuckle or a snicker, but a full, audible laugh that echoed through the silent courtroom. The room exploded. Gasps, shouts. Someone screamed. The bailiffs stepped forward. Judge Morrison slammed her gavel, but the chaos continued. Rebecca Patterson stood frozen, the photo of Emma falling from her hands, her face contorted in disbelief and anguish. "Oh, please," Carr said, still smiling. "Are you done yet? This is pathetic." David Patterson lunged forward, held back by 2 bailiffs. "You son of a bitch! You murdered our daughter!" Rebecca's voice rose to a scream. "How dare you? She was a child, an innocent child who trusted you." Carr leaned back in his chair, his expression one of amused contempt. "She was in the wrong place at the wrong time. Get over it. People die every day. You're not special." The courtroom descended into pandemonium. The bailiffs surrounded Carr. The victim advocates rushed to the Pattersons. And Judge Morrison stood, her face flushed with fury that decades on the bench had never fully prepared her for. "Order!" Judge Morrison's voice cut through the chaos like a whip. "Everyone sit down right now or I will clear this courtroom." The room gradually quieted, but the tension was suffocating. Rebecca Patterson collapsed into her seat, sobbing uncontrollably. David held her, his own face twisted with rage and grief, and Carr sat smirking, apparently enjoying the chaos he had created. Judge Morrison looked at Carr with an expression of cold, controlled fury. "Mr. Carr, you are in contempt of this court. But I promise you, that will be the least of your concerns when I'm finished with you." Carr shrugged. "Do whatever you want, Your Honor. I've already been convicted. What else can you do to me?" "You're about to find out," Judge Morrison said quietly. "Bailiff, restrain the defendant." 2 bailiffs moved to either side of Carr, placing hands on his shoulders. His smirk faltered slightly, the first crack in his facade of indifference. Should defendants who mock victims in court face additional criminal charges beyond contempt? Comment below. This wasn't just a sentencing hearing anymore. This was a monster revealing himself in front of the world, and a judge who was about to make sure he paid for every second of cruelty he had inflicted. Judge Morrison sat back down, her eyes never leaving Carr's face. The courtroom was silent now, everyone waiting to see what would happen next. The judge picked up her sentencing memo, the document she had spent days preparing, reviewing the evidence, considering the appropriate punishment. But what Carr had just done, laughing at a grieving mother, mocking a dead child, showing complete contempt for human suffering, had changed everything. "Mr. Carr," Judge Morrison began, her voice measured but carrying an edge of steel that made everyone in the courtroom sit up straighter. "I have been a judge for 30 years. I have sentenced murderers, rapists, child abusers, and every manner of criminal that society produces. I have seen evil. I have seen remorselessness. I have seen defendants who showed no empathy for their victims. But never, in 3 decades on this bench, have I witnessed such a complete absence of humanity as you have displayed here today." Carr's smirk remained, but his eyes had changed. Something in Judge Morrison's tone was cutting through his arrogance. "You murdered a 7-year-old child," Judge Morrison continued. "The evidence presented at trial showed that Emma Patterson suffered for hours before you ended her life. The medical examiner testified that she was conscious and aware of what was happening to her. She was terrified. She was in pain. And she died alone, far from her parents, murdered by a predator who saw her as nothing more than an object for his own gratification." The courtroom was absolutely silent. Even the reporters had stopped typing, transfixed by Judge Morrison's words. "Your crime was heinous enough to warrant the maximum sentence under law," Judge Morrison said. "But what you have done here today, laughing at Emma's mother, mocking her grief, showing contempt for the suffering you have caused, has removed any doubt about what kind of creature you are and what justice requires." She paused, letting the weight of her words settle over the courtroom. "The prosecution has recommended life in prison without the possibility of parole. Your defense attorney has argued for some possibility of parole after 30 years, citing your age and potential for rehabilitation." Judge Morrison's expression hardened. "You have just demonstrated, in front of this court and these witnesses, that you have no capacity for rehabilitation. You have no remorse. You have no empathy. You are a predator who sees other human beings, including children, as objects for your amusement. And you will never, ever be safe to walk free in society again." Carr's smirk was gone now, replaced by something that might have been the first glimmer of understanding. "Vincent Carr," Judge Morrison said, her voice ringing with authority, "you are hereby sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole for the murder of Emma Patterson. This sentence is to be served in maximum security. Additionally, I am imposing special conditions on your incarceration. You will be placed in administrative segregation for your own protection and to ensure you cannot harm or influence other inmates. You will have no access to media, no ability to profit from your crime through interviews or written accounts, and you will serve every single day of your natural life behind bars, with zero chance of ever seeing freedom again." The courtroom erupted in applause. The Pattersons held each other, sobbing with relief. Carr's attorney sat with his head in his hands, knowing there would be no successful appeal from this. And Carr himself sat motionless, the reality finally sinking in. He had sealed his own fate with his cruelty. But Judge Morrison wasn't finished. She held up her hand for silence. "Furthermore," she continued, "for your contempt of court, your deliberate mockery of the victim's family, and your complete disrespect for these proceedings, I am holding you in criminal contempt. You are sentenced to an additional 6 months in county jail, to be served consecutively to your life sentence. This may seem symbolic given your life sentence, but I want it on the record that your behavior today was criminal, despicable, and will be punished separately." She leaned forward, staring directly at Carr. "You asked me what else I could do to you. Here's your answer. You will spend the rest of your life in a concrete cell, isolated from society, with nothing but your own thoughts for company. You will never feel sunlight on your face as a free man. You will never taste freedom again. You will grow old and die in prison, unmourned and unremembered except as the monster who murdered an innocent child. And when you take your last breath, the only comfort you'll have is knowing that somewhere, Emma Patterson's memory lives on in the hearts of people who loved her, while your name will be forgotten the moment they close your grave." The silence that followed was profound. Even the reporters seemed stunned by the brutal finality of Judge Morrison's words. Carr sat with his head down, his bravado completely shattered. The smirk was gone. The mockery was gone. For the first time since the trial began, he looked like what he truly was. a pathetic, broken individual who had thrown away any chance at redemption. "Take him away," Judge Morrison ordered. The bailiffs lifted Carr from his chair. As they led him toward the side door that would take him to the transport vehicle and eventually to maximum security prison, Carr looked back one last time at the Pattersons. Whatever he saw in their faces, the grief, the rage, the satisfaction at his sentence, it made him look away quickly. The door closed with a heavy thud. Carr was gone, and the courtroom slowly began to empty, people processing what they had just witnessed. The first twist came 3 days after the sentencing. Carr's defense attorney filed an appeal, arguing that Judge Morrison's sentence was excessive and that her comments during sentencing showed bias. The appeal claimed that Carr's behavior, while inappropriate, didn't warrant the harsh conditions of his incarceration, particularly the administrative segregation and media restrictions. The appellate court reviewed the case over the following months. When they issued their ruling, they not only upheld Judge Morrison's sentence in its entirety, but they added their own commentary. The 3-judge panel wrote in their opinion, "The defendant's conduct during the victim impact statements demonstrated a level of depravity and contempt that fully justified the trial court's sentencing decisions. Administrative segregation and media restrictions are appropriate measures to protect both the defendant and the integrity of the justice system. This court finds no error in the trial court's rulings." Sentence affirmed. The ruling included something else that sent shockwaves through the legal community. The appellate court noted that Carr's behavior had been so egregious that they were forwarding their opinion to the state legislature with a recommendation that laughing at or mocking victims during sentencing hearings should be codified as a separate criminal offense, carrying additional prison time beyond contempt of court charges. They called it aggravated contempt in the presence of victims. The second twist came 6 months into Carr's sentence. Prison officials, required by law to conduct psychological evaluations of all maximum security inmates, discovered something that made Carr's behavior even more chilling. The evaluation revealed that Carr had a documented history of narcissistic personality disorder and antisocial behavior that had been identified as far back as his teenage years. Multiple psychologists had warned that he posed an escalating danger to society. Reports from his previous incarcerations showed he had bragged about wanting to do something that would make people remember his name. The revelation triggered a review of the criminal justice system's handling of Carr's case. How had someone with such clear warning signs been released from prison just 3 months before Emma's murder? Why had psychiatric recommendations for long-term treatment been ignored? The review uncovered systemic failures at multiple levels, parole boards that ignored mental health warnings, budget cuts that eliminated monitoring programs, and a system that prioritized moving people through the process rather than protecting public safety. The state attorney general launched a formal investigation. Over the following year, they identified 14 other offenders with similar psychological profiles who had been released despite warnings from mental health professionals. 3 of them had gone on to commit new violent crimes, including 2 murders. The investigation led to comprehensive parole reform, mandatory mental health evaluations before release, and a new requirement that parole boards consult with victims and mental health professionals before making decisions. Emma's Law, as it became known, was signed by the governor 18 months after Carr's sentencing. It mandated that offenders with documented antisocial personality disorders and histories of escalating violence could only be released with approval from a panel including mental health experts, victims advocates, and law enforcement officials. The law also provided funding for monitoring programs and mental health treatment for high-risk offenders. It was imperfect, but it was a start. The third and final twist came from the Patterson family themselves. Rebecca and David, who had endured unimaginable loss and then been mocked by their daughter's killer in court, made a decision that shocked everyone who knew them. They established the Emma Patterson Foundation, dedicated to child safety education, support for families of murdered children, and advocacy for stronger protections against predatory offenders. Using donations that poured in from around the country after Carr's sentencing went viral, the foundation created programs in schools teaching children about danger recognition and personal safety. They funded support groups for parents navigating the aftermath of losing a child to violence. And they lobbied for legislative changes to close the gaps that had allowed Carr to be on the streets. Within 3 years, the Emma Patterson Foundation had reached over 50,000 children through its safety programs, provided support to 200 families dealing with the murder of a child, and helped pass protective legislation in 4 states. The Pattersons didn't do it to erase their pain. Nothing could do that. They did it because they didn't want any other family to experience what they had, and because they wanted Emma's legacy to be about protection and love, not just about the monster who had killed her. If your child's murderer laughed at you in court, how would you respond? Could you turn that pain into something positive like the Pattersons did? Share your thoughts in the comments. As for Carr, his life in maximum security was exactly as Judge Morrison had described. Administrative segregation meant 23 hours a day in a cell with no television, no visitors beyond his attorney, and no contact with other inmates. The 1 hour he was allowed out each day was spent in a small concrete recreation yard, alone with only the sky visible above the high walls. He had no access to media, couldn't write a memoir or give interviews. His name gradually faded from public consciousness, remembered only as a footnote in Emma's law and in the minds of those he had destroyed. Prison records showed that Carr adapted poorly to incarceration. He filed numerous grievances about his conditions, all denied. He got into altercations with guards, resulting in additional disciplinary measures. And according to psychological reports required as part of his segregation status, he showed no signs of remorse or rehabilitation. The evaluations consistently recommended he remain in administrative segregation indefinitely, noting he posed a danger to other inmates and continued to express satisfaction at having become famous. Years passed. The Pattersons rebuilt their lives around the void Emma's death had left, channeling their grief into the foundation and finding purpose in protecting other children. Judge Morrison retired from the bench, but not before sentencing dozens more criminals, always with Emma's case in the back of her mind, a reminder of what evil looked like and what justice required. And the legal community continued to cite Carr's case in discussions about victim rights, courtroom decorum, and the importance of sentencing that reflects not just the crime but the criminal's character. The video of Carr laughing at Rebecca Patterson became mandatory viewing in law schools, used to teach future attorneys about the importance of preparing clients for sentencing, the consequences of showing contempt in court, and the power of victim impact statements. Students watched Carr's smirk disappear as Judge Morrison delivered her sentence, studying how a single moment of cruelty could seal a defendant's fate and remove any possibility of judicial mercy. The lesson was brutal and undeniable. Remorse matters. Showing respect for victims matters. And laughing at a grieving mother who has lost her child to your violence is not just morally reprehensible, it's legally catastrophic. Carr had walked into that courtroom with his attorneys arguing for some hope of eventual parole. He walked out with life without parole, administrative segregation, and a legacy as one of the most despised criminals in state history. All because he couldn't control his need to inflict more pain. Emma Patterson's memory lived on through the foundation that bore her name, through the children who learned to protect themselves because of programs her parents created, through the families who found support in their darkest hours, and through the legislation that made communities safer. Her 7 years of life had more impact and meaning than Carr's entire existence ever would. And in his concrete cell, isolated and forgotten, Vincent Carr had decades to reflect on the moment he laughed in court. Decades to realize that his cruelty had sealed his fate. Decades to understand that the justice system, represented by Judge Morrison's unflinching sentence, had done exactly what it was supposed to do: remove him from society forever and ensure he could never hurt another child again. Power without compassion is tyranny. Cruelty without consequences is permission. And sometimes, one moment of mockery in a courtroom, one laugh at unspeakable grief, one display of inhuman indifference, can define exactly who someone is and determine how they will spend every remaining day of their life. If you believe that monsters like Vincent Carr should never see freedom again and that victims deserve justice, subscribe and turn on notifications, because tomorrow we have another story that will remind you why the justice system exists and what happens when it works exactly as it should.